In terms of gaming, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 is definitely not the best option, but it still is a decent chip if that's what you want to use it for. It has trouble when you want to play for an extended period of time due to the rising temperatures of the processor. To prevent damage, the phone will throttle itself back, which slows down the processor and in turn decreases performance. In my case, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 was basically the only option since there are only a few smartphones in existence that combine older features like a headphone jack with modern features such as wireless charging, while also remaining affordable. But what phone could possibly cater to those demands, you might ask? Cue the Sony Xperia 5 Mark IV. It has just about everything I was looking for, and I was even able to get a good deal on it. Don't get me wrong, I'd love to have the Red Magic 9 Pro, which has a virtually invisible front camera, a bezel-less display, and a built-in fan to help manage the temperatures of its Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, but I also didn't want to spend $1,000 on a new phone, especially when I can't use it with my carrier. I was looking at the S21 FE as a more budget-friendly alternative since it's a lot cheaper and is only one generation behind in terms of the CPU, but I decided against it since it lacked some of the older features that I wanted. Additionally, the Snapdragon 888 it uses also has thermal throttling problems. I would also like to mention that the Xperia 5 Mark V uses the 8 Gen 2, which on a large scale does not suffer from the thermal throttling nearly as much compared to the 8 Gen 1. It seems the whole thermal throttling issue was for the most part fixed when Snapdragon designed the 8 Plus Gen 1, which doesn't help me at all. And to answer your question, the reason why I didn't get the Xperia 5 Mark V is because it was only released in Japan, and it didn't support my carrier. That brings me back to my phone, the Xperia 5 Mark IV, and its overheating issues. If I want to play it without helping cool the CPU, I can play it for about an hour and a half before my phone heats up to a noticeable level, and then the game slows down, which is probably fine for most people, but I like emulators. I like them a lot. And let me tell you something about modern emulators. They can push your processor to the max depending on what you play. Then instead of an hour and a half, you notice slowdowns after like 15 to 20 minutes, and it makes your phone hot. That finally brings me to the project itself, the whole point of this video. I wanted to create something that could solve the thermal throttling problem while also being modular enough to use with my Razer Kishi V2 controller. So I searched the internet to see if someone else had already done this, or something similar. That's when I found this. A while ago, someone on Reddit posted something that they did which was really smart but also very simple. They took a cooling fan accessory that you can buy for phones and placed it underneath the back of a first generation Razer Kishi. Now, a huge difference between the first generation and the second generation Razer Kishi controllers is that the second one is completely hard plastic, not bendable, not foldable, nothing like that. So you can't just do the same thing. But that wasn't going to stop me, and neither did Razer's Starbit screws holding the Kishi V2 together. Originally, I had an idea that involved aluminum foil to make the heat travel around and then outside of the case, but that did not work at all. For my next idea, I figured I could probably cut enough plastic out of the V2 to slip something between the controller and the phone. A heatsink, to be specific. So I cut a hole in my phone case the shape of the heatsink, which I took off of an old computer I found in my scrap pile, and sure enough, it fit. I also drilled some more holes in the case to help the phone dissipate heat because plastic is actually pretty good at trapping it. And after adding the heatsink, my game sessions lasted a bit longer. The heatsink was doing its job, and I could have stopped there. But I wanted to keep going. So I put a fan on that. The fan in question came from an old graphics card that was lying around collecting dust, and it came with a sick aluminum cage, which I assume also acted like a heatsink. I did have to open the cage and flip the fan in order for the air to blow onto the exposed part of the heatsink. I also had to cut some holes in the cage so more air could be sucked in from the outside. In order to connect the fan to the Kishi V2, I was going to have to get creative. I thought the idea of using a magnet was pretty cool, so I went with that. All I did was put some electrical tape over a neodymium magnet placed on the back of the Kishi V2 and stuck a round metal plate on the back of the fan which attached to the magnet. I still had to direct the air at the heatsink, but for now I would move on to figuring out how to power the fan. I thought about wiring up a wireless QI receiver to the fan and then hiding it under the phone case while turning on battery share, but I didn't feel like ordering one after looking at how thin the wires actually are. I probably would have messed something up trying to rewire it to the fan. So instead I tried using a lithium rechargeable battery I stole from an old Wii U controller in my scrap bin, but it only supplied about 3.4 volts and I needed the fan to spin faster. So I opted for a 9 volt. In retrospect, I probably shouldn't have done this since the fan would normally have only pulled around 5 volts, but I haven't had any problems yet. In order to attach it to the Kishi V2, I took some soft Velcro and glued it to the back. From an ergonomic standpoint, if I choose not to attach the fan in the battery, I'd rather accidentally touch soft Velcro than hooked Velcro. So the hooked Velcro was glued to the back of the rechargeable 9-volt battery. Okay, back to controlling the directional flow of air. In order for me to get the air to blow onto the heatsink and not everywhere else, I took some old Amazon gift cards, since I don't have a 3D printer, and carefully cut them into little pieces that would surround the bottom of the fan and the area of the phone where the heatsink is. Apparently, it also created a good phone stand. I finished off by wrapping the wires in the bottom of the fan in electrical tape for a sleek aesthetic. Then I took some foam and a small box I had lying around and created this for the fan and 9-volt batteries. And that was it. The project was done. I'm honestly surprised at how well everything turned out, considering the fact that I didn't really use any measurements, but instead just eyeballed pretty much everything. It isn't too heavy to hold, and everything packs up nicely. Even the Kishi V2 fits in its original box, no problem. For a few items, I was really tempted to just buy something online, but I'm glad I was able to use parts that I had lying around. Not only did I save money by doing this, but I gave new life to what would otherwise be e-waste. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll leave a like. If you like this kind of content, please consider subscribing. With that said, I'll see you in the next video, or the short that comes out right after this, because that's what the YouTube algorithm favors right now.